Guess where I am? Yep, that's right, I'm at the beach again and just off for my swim. But before I do that, I just want to introduce this guest on my channel, a guy called Phil from Preston in England. He's an electrician, full-time electrician, and he also runs a podcast called Amish Inquisition with a couple of other guys. And I've been on his podcast before. I'll leave a link to his podcast site now on YouTube. It's a YouTube channel, and yeah, I like him. He's a good guy. He's Phil. He's in many ways he's a great example of a very, very, very intelligent guy who is also hard-working and well-motivated too. So this guy, Phil, he's done his reading, so he's a very, very knowledgeable guy, and he's worth listening to. And like me, he was the sort of guy that got into trouble at school for asking questions, wasn't massively keen on conformity for conformity's sake. Anyway, in this interview, what sort of things we talk about? Well, we talk about what's going on at the moment in England with Sir Keir Starmer, and I was quite keen to get Phil's take on things, with him being actually living there. And then we also talk about this NPC kind of stereotype. What is it possible to wake up NPCs? Is the term NPC just a divide and rule operation anyway? And yeah, it's a very fascinating chat, and I hope you enjoy it. Come on, spill the beans. What's going on in England? I just want to know from somebody who's a sound bloke who's on the ground in Britain. What's your perception of what's going on?
How long have you got? It's all happening.
I'm a cheapskate. I've got 40 minutes on a freebie Zoom, but
yeah, cracky. It's chaos, Nigel. To be fair, do you know when it was all kicking off after the incident in Southport? I don't know what it was. I just didn't have any spare time to do any rioting. But there seemed to be thousands of people, you know, with just nothing better to do, ready to go out on the streets and cause trouble. And I guess the way I look.
Phil, well, I'm not going to interrupt very often, but so did you actually? Did you see any rioting with your own eyes?
Well, no. This is the thing. We have to be very sceptical of what the media provides us regarding information. There's an old line in Plato quoting Socrates, and I think he says something like, "The only thing that I know is that I know nothing." And it's one of those sort of axioms that I try and often fail, but try to keep in the back of my head whenever I'm being served certain messaging on the media, and to deconstruct it, see where it's coming from, what's it trying to portray. And, you know, that's a great point. Seeing is believing. It's like when you're talking about history. I love history. I love reading about history. And as we read something in a history book, we take it as gospel. That's what happened. When history is written by historians with their own biases, their own political perspectives, their own motivations. And it's the same with journalism in the modern day. If you can call it journalism, crikey. I mean, the standard of journalism's never been poorer, I don't think, in the West.
What's your feeling then? Did these riots take place or what?
I know that there was some incidents in my hometown in Preston, but it was very small scale. I think there was activity. There was definitely rioting, I would say. Just from what I'm hearing on the ground. But again, that's not unusual. Look back over the last 100 years of history, there is riots. And to me, it's a symptom of widespread disenfranchisement among certain demographics. People have had enough, and they're looking for an excuse to lash out.
Yeah.
and the powers that should not be are more than willing to give them an excuse when it serves a greater
Yeah.
purpose. So there's a bit of useful idiotism. I'll coin that phrase within
Yeah.
it. People are manipulated. I'm sure there will have been agent provocateurs throughout.
Yeah.
That's a well-known tactic that's
Yeah.
used by the security service and the intelligence services to infiltrate these movements, guide them if they want to, or
Yeah.
encourage, inflame situations. But yeah, it was kind of, it did feel like a powder keg kind of situation.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not the type who sort of considers that there was nothing happening, that it was all a fabrication.
Yeah.
I don't know for certain because I wasn't in every city centre
No,
while
no,
this,
no.
but you've got to try
So,
and draw your own conclusions best you can.
so I think I'm not sure whether are you basically saying it was a bit of the old problem reaction solution so Starmer could bring in his police state type thing?
It's kind of convenient, isn't it? As soon
Yeah.
as the new government gets in, I mean, it was within days, wasn't it?
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
couple of weeks. Um, it's hard to say that because you have to bear in mind what triggered it was those murders in Southport, and
Yeah.
as far as I know, I'm really close to there. I'm only like 10 miles, 15 miles.
Yeah.
Don't question. I'm not questioning the fact that those happened.
Yeah.
So that raises a different question. If we think that the whole situation was fabricated for political reasons to bring
Yeah.
in the censorship, the
Yeah.
expedited executions, all the rest of it, I think maybe that's going maybe a step too far. I think
Yeah,
what's
but
the
but
Churchill
Phil,
quote?
you can go that one of like saying, well, MI5 can have like patsies, MK Ultra people, so
Yeah,
you can still say the murders took place without discrediting the problem reaction solution hypothesis, and that's where I would be.
yeah, that's absolutely true. And the thing is, there's no way of us being sure.
Yeah,
We're kind of shadow boxing really, because us plebs on the internet are only given so much information. We can only find out so much for ourselves. So
yeah,
again, it goes back to looking at past events, analyzing them, and seeing if there are correlations between them and what's happening now. And then it comes down to
sure.
probabilities, doesn't it?
Yeah,
What's the
yeah.
probability of this situation or that or the other? And we can't really be sure. So that's why I try to be not too definitive. Again, going back, the only thing I know is I don't know anything.
Phil, that's cool. I've no problem with that position at all. So, how are people from what you see? Because are you a Sparky?
Yeah, yeah, self-employed, lucky, yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. So, what do you see when you're out and about? How are people reacting to it?
Well, this is what's strange because I'm self-employed and I do like small private work. I don't go in for commercial or industrial work. It's soulless. I like to be out meeting people every day, and every day is different. I meet new people every day across the social spectrum, the political spectrum. It's variety. It's great. It's one of the perks of the job is
Yeah, yeah,
actually getting out there. That's one of the things I struggled with the most during the 2020 madness was the I missed all that. And to be fair, most people are just getting on as if nothing happened. Um, People are very busy. People have busy lives. They have their
yeah,
own business, maybe. They have their full-time jobs. They have kids to raise, grandkids to help raise. I think people are more disengaged. I think it's a vocal minority that are particularly active on social media, like Twitter,
yeah,
seem to over egg this pudding, and most people are just too busy. It's like I said at the start, I was too busy to get involved with any rioting. I had football
yeah,
practice to do, and I had Cub Scouts to sort out for kids and all. People have to get on with their lives,
yeah.
and it's small active minorities that can make big differences and have large influences on our society as a whole and how we operate.
So, do you ever, when you're out and about meeting your customers, do you ever ask them their opinions, or do you just stick to?
It's a difficult one that.
Yeah.
Um, Occasionally, I tend to try and let it come up naturally if I can.
Yeah.
I remember, when was it? I think it was 2022. I was working on a house, refurbing a house around the corner, and there was a plumber on the job called Steve who I'd never met before. And there was just me and him in the house. He was doing new central heating, and I was rewiring it. And I needed to go into the bathroom where he was working, and we had a quick chat, very general. And all of a sudden, Steve brought up the topic of diet and farming.
Yeah.
And my ears pricked up because it became obvious that Steve was a thinking person quite quickly. And he was talking about regenerative, how do I can't even say it, regenerative farming and topics like these. So that's very interesting, Steve. We keep going and keep going. And then Steve goes, have you ever heard of the Fat Emperor? Have you ever heard of Ivor Cummings?
Yeah.
I went, yes, I have, Steve. In fact, I watched quite a few of his videos on YouTube.
Yeah.
And then Steve goes, am I in good company? And I went, yeah, I think you are, Steve.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
all of a sudden, we were off then, and we were talking about Fauci. We were talking about people
The
walking around
medical
in
experiment.
people walking through parks in 30-degree heat with scarves over their faces. We went through the
Yeah.
whole thing, and it was like, oh my gosh, I found someone.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that it kind of happens organically, I think. When you get talking, you have to have the time to be able to engage in conversation with someone for a start. But I think you can weigh up pretty quickly, again, whether someone's a thinking person or a non-thinking
Yeah.
person. And there's
But
no point trying to. I don't get into this kind of trying to convert people and proselytize. And I think
Yeah.
I think you're running an uphill battle there, really.
You are, Phil. You're banging. Well, I've done it, and I still can't help myself sometimes, and end up banging my head against a brick wall. Really. Well, not
Yeah,
really. That's exactly what happens, and I just go into piss take mode.
yeah. And you end up arguing. And I had a
Yeah.
similar thing. mm, with well, let's say a relative. I'll say my father-in-law, and that ended in a bit of an awkward kind of argument over a certain
Yeah.
medical intervention.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just think, you can plant a seed and that's about it, but you've got to let it grow, and people have to do their own thinking. You can't force the
Yeah.
issue without falling
No,
out.
but Phil, as you said before, what you got to determine is whether you're facing somebody who actually is, as using your word, a thinker. Like,
Yeah.
there was the old meme, the NPC meme. Well,
Mm.
like now, my belief is that I think that there's a lot of people, the majority of people who don't think. All they do is listen to sound bites, and then they just regurgitate them. They've been sort of set up by the system, to say a certain thing at a certain time. Like, I used to know this GP, and he was straight onto it. All the sound bites, anti-vaxxer. He could play like bullshit bingo.
Yeah.
With these pre-programmed phrases. And then when it was about Putin, it was like Putin knew Hitler. And these people, they don't think. They don't
No.
think at all. That's my belief. That might sound a bit harsh, but
It's I was thinking about this the other day because I've been using these terms off and on, like NPC and sheeple and those sorts of terms. Normies, that's another one.
yeah,
And I was thinking the other day that maybe is this another dividing line? You know how
probably.
the powers that be use divide and conquer as one of their
Yeah,
favorite.
yeah, definitely.
Your Apple Mac and I'm PC, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Man
Yeah.
United, Man City.
That's
There's a
it.
million ways of dividing, and I just thought,
Yeah.
no, are they weaponizing this normies and tinfoil
Well,
hatters?
I think they definitely are. But what I would say is that in this case, it doesn't actually change the basic fact that from my observations, just this isn't like one of these oxymorons, a subjective truth. This is what I'm observing is that there are a lot of people who seem incapable of independent thought of any sort. What they do is listen really carefully to the sound bites, and then they'll just, I've used this phrase repeater station, like you've got maybe an antenna, and it sends out a signal, from maybe the BBC or the government. And then maybe 5 miles away, you've got a booster signal so that it listens to what's being said and then rebroadcasts.
Yeah, I totally agree with that and agree with your observation. And I was just wondering if we need if it would be beneficial to temper, just speaking personally, whether I'd be better tempering my language and trying to not use those phrases. I was thinking, this is how paranoid I am. Am I playing into the thing by using these terms that offer another dividing line?
Yeah,
and do I need to be
I
more
get
empathic
that.
in some way? But
I get that.
the other part of my brain was thinking, I remember how much shit I caught in 2020. You get those horrible looks.
Oh yeah, and revenge and all of that. I don't want
Yeah.
to. I'm not in the business of like going back to people that I used to work with who treated me like dirt and just trying to rub their noses in it, because I know nothing good will come from it, because all I'm going to get is like a pre-programmed response, like Arnie in the Terminator thing. Do you remember that one in the first Terminator movie where Arnie's fixing his eyeball? I think I mentioned that when I was on your podcast. And then it's like, the guy's saying it's really smelly in that room, mate. And the computer, like different options. It's like, fuck you, arsehole, pardon my French. So there's no point in trying to rattle these people. But what I would say is that maybe it's a useful tool, just a useful frame of reference for myself, in that I just realized, well, there's no point in trying to argue with a pre-programmed computer, an NPC. I'm not going to get anywhere. It's not that I hate these people, because I don't hate them.
No.
But what I do know is that it's pointless trying to communicate with them, because they're not capable of independent thinking, let alone critical thinking. They're just not capable of it.
Yeah. I don't know. That's an interesting point to sort of ponder, because myself, I wasn't born as a conspiracy therapist. I call myself a conspiracy therapist rather than theorist, because that's what we try to do on Sundays, is help people. You have to make light of these things. You have to laugh at it, because otherwise you can end up in a dark place. And people have never been so isolated. It's one of the observations I've noticed in recent years, and it was amplified massively in 2020. People have never been less resilient physically or psychologically. We've never been more divided, and people have never been so isolated. That's why you need to find people.
I agree with that. But what I would say is that for people that resisted it, like me and you, my own feeling is that I'm 100 times stronger than I used to be.
Yeah.
Both physically and mentally, because I've just gone down. I've kind of discovered the lies that we've been taught about food.
All right.
And basically that food lie has killed thousands times more people than the medical experiment did.
Which food lies are you talking about?
Well, but the NHS's healthy eating advice, low fat, high carb diets.
There's a whole story about the food pyramid, isn't there, that originated in the United States that we sort of adopted.
Yeah. And the NHS is still doing this now. It's like recommending to diabetics that they eat bananas and stuff, which basically break down, carbohydrate. I don't know if you've ever did. I think it was A-level biology. Like I did, like the Nuffield variety, which was like heavily based on experimentation and scientific method and stuff. So one of these experiments involved me chewing a piece of bread, putting it into a test tube, pouring in this clear liquid called Benedict solution. And then you sort of heated it. And then when the carbohydrates turned into sugar, the Benedict solution turned blue. And it was the saliva in your mouth that was converting the carbohydrates into sugar. And I'd forgotten all of that stuff. But I used to eat a very, very heavy carbohydrate based diet because, I used to play a lot of sport and stuff. And, you bought into that one that you need to carb load and all of that. And
Lucozade.
exactly. Oh, the other big one now, I don't know how old you are, Phil, but I remember the Mars a day helps you work, rest, and play. Mars was like portrayed as a health food for energy and stuff. Ridiculous. Bloody Mars bar.
It's upside down world, isn't it?
It is. It is.
That's the power of marketing, isn't it? And words and wordplay and
and obviously you've got criminals in the NHS. For me, it's inconceivable that these GPs they're whenever they give the prescribed advice, they must see their patients get a lot worse rather than better. But they still keep on doing what they're told to do and following the NHS protocols because they don't want to get struck off and they want to keep their money and their status.
Yeah. Once you sign up to that institution, you have to follow their guidelines and edicts.
Yeah.
And if you dare to question or cross those, you're going to be out on your ear. And once, it's a well-paid job, you get established, you've got a big mortgage, you've got your kids in private school, you don't want to give any of that up.
No.
Some would call that cowardice. If you firmly
That's what it is, Phil. It's basically, again, I would say it's NPC thinking. It's shallow, non-thinking, basically. All you're doing is, I've never been like this, but you know how there's some people, they sort of think that they've made it in life if they can buy a new BMW every 3 years, or they wear branded clothes, or they want to fit in, they want to buy things that confer status so that other people view them more favorably and all of that. That's an NPC way of thinking. And I think a lot of doctors are like that.
Yeah, social standing is the sort of myth of social standing that people like to stratify themselves, look at where they are in the social pyramid, and part of their game is to be at the top. I'm the same. I couldn't give a toss about material things or money as long as I go by Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah, me too.
As long as I have a roof over my head and I've got food in my belly, and the same for my family. Anything else is kind of a bonus, really. I'm not into trinkets and toys and gadgets. I'm not into gadgets. A lot of people I know, they have to have the latest iWatch or whatever, a laptop, and to me, it's of no consequence to me whatsoever.
What Phil? I'll tell you what you're pursuing. You're pursuing the very top of that hierarchy, which is self-actualization. That's self-evident from watching some of your podcasts. That's what you're pursuing. And I think that's what the people that rejected the medical experiment, that gave up all the material trinkets and the status and the being part of the collective, that's why they did it, because what they're pursuing is, on their deathbed, they want to look back on their life and think that they did the right thing, and they know slightly more than they did before.
Yeah, no one ever got to the deathbed and thought, God, I wish I'd worked a few more weekends so I could have got that Armani suit.
I don't know, Phil. I don't. I think some of them do.
Really?
Oh my God. 100%. 100%. I think many people, they go to their deathbed still with that paradigm in their head.
God, that's so sad.
Well, we're just different, aren't we? We were all subjected to the same external environment, the same coercion, the same propaganda, the same pressure. But we responded in a completely different way from them. Again, I want to emphasize, I don't hate these people, but what I can't deny is that they are very different from us.
I wonder if there's something sort of in the psychology, something maybe genetic or spiritual or something that triggers that, because there's a reason why I'm self-employed. I don't like being told what to do by anyone. It's not that I'm nasty when I had a boss or anything like that, or I was ignorant. Or I just don't like that control. I like to be able to do
Yeah.
what I want. And so the best way of me to do that is to be self-employed and be my own boss. Is that
Well,
a
Phil,
coincidence? That sort of,
no, it's not. But you shouldn't view that. You shouldn't frame that in a negative way,
I
because
don't.
your desire to exercise your free will, it's not harming anybody. It's not like, you know, you're actually doing good, aren't you? Because you're entering into transactions with other people who are free choice to use you as an electrician, and it's your free choice whether you want to take on that work, and both parties benefit. You know, you exercising your free will with others who are exercising their free will. It's a positive sum game.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the voluntarism
Yeah,
philosophy. That
me
you know,
too.
I think we shouldn't be compelled to do things we don't want to do.
Me
But
too. Yeah,
the other sort of side of that, the aspect of that thing is responsibility. That's what comes with it. So, if you are going to be adopting that sort of voluntary philosophy, you have the responsibility to do the right thing, to be responsible for yourself, for your family, to not
yeah,
be reliant, to be self-reliant as best as you can, to look to constantly improve.
yeah,
Um, don't be a dick is a good mantra.
yeah. Well, it's not in business. If you're a dick, you're going to go out of business. You might make a bit of profit in the short run, but in the long run, you know, people will rumble you. This, for me, this is where I would say that, you know, the free market is it's a force for good. It incentivizes ethical behavior.
It does if it's free.
Yeah,
The problem is government gets in the way
that's
and
right.
prevents the free market from
Yeah,
expelling. So you'll have people like I mean, it's famous in the building trade for corruption. People paying off councillors to get
yeah,
large development contracts. We've had numerous scandals.
yeah,
People getting side deals from suppliers. You know, the supplier will go to the company's boss and say, "Hey, put your money through our business. There might be
yeah,
a holiday to Disney World in it for you next year." Um, if these things are out in the open and sort of part of the deal, then I kind of don't have a problem with it. But it's opaque and it's hidden and
well,
it's sort of back
the other thing
alley.
that's the other thing that's dodgy is that the money is being extracted from people against their will. You know, there's no free will about whether you pay taxes or not. Because if you refuse to pay whatever they say you owe them, they throw you in a cage, or they threaten to throw you in a cage, and then they're
Absolutely.
just using your money that they've stolen from you to feather their own nests. And you know, that's not voluntarism. But Phil, what I was going to say then, going back a little bit, would I be right in thinking that you believe that there's no point in trying to wake up people who are asleep?
No, I wouldn't say there's no point. I think it has to be done. It's difficult, but it has to be done kind of carefully and tactfully. And who is it? Is it Mark Passio or Larkin? Or is it Larkin who does Larkin Rose who does like a bullet point list of how to go about the process of
Oh, I've not seen that.
I forget who it is. If I remember, I'll send you a message.
Yeah,
But yeah, I think you can't force the issue. You run
no,
the risk of driving people further the other way.
yeah,
Um, and again, I think it has to be kind of a seed planting
yeah,
operation where you can put little question. Oh, that's one of the tricks is to use questions rather than
yeah,
statements. So you can use questions to plant a seed when something crazy is happening in the media or whatever. You can use questions to plant a seed in another person to maybe just get them thinking
yeah,
an alternative perspective or an alternative explanation, or
yeah,
maybe that isn't quite how it seems, or whatever. And you have to let people come to it naturally, I think. But I've
yeah.
I've never.
No, you're right, Phil. That's. Yeah, I used to be. I don't know when I started my YouTube about 3 years ago. I kind of I was naive, and I thought that it was possible for me to kind of tell people what the truth was, and they would kind of listen to it, and then they would become awake. I now realize that that's not possible, and like you, my only the only thing that I try to do occasionally is ask questions. But going back to like spirituality, it's all, you know, a lot of people say we are in a battle between good and evil, and I definitely believe that. Um, sorry, just pop-up thing saying 10 minutes left. But you know, it's almost like people have to repent, don't they? They have to repent themselves. They have to make a decision to repent. And it's only once they've done that that they'll have eyes to see and ears to hear. That's, you know, quoting from the Bible.
Yeah.
That's my feeling. They've got to make their decision to turn away from the lie, turn away from Satan towards God and Jesus, the love of the truth.
Yeah, and it's a big ask because it's psychologically painful to admit that you're wrong, and particularly to admit that you've been wrong your entire life.
Yeah.
So that's a big ask for people. It's almost like it needs some sort of Damascene intervention, a big event, single sort of big event to spark that change in people. And it's weird, you know. It'd be interesting to hear from people who've, you know, the people who've changed the perspective since 2020. Because I've been on this road for over 10 years, probably since the early 2000s, mid 2000s maybe.
Yeah.
Where I was questioning different things like 9/11 and various other subjects.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to get the perspective of people who've changed in the midst of the last big event.
Yeah.
And see what it was. What was the switch that changed it for them? What shifted the perspective?
For me, it was just the sheer number of people who I thought were good people who actually, when push come to shove, they folded like a cheap suit and complied with what could only be called evil.
Yeah, it was the sheer weight of numbers. I remember, God, the was it Thursday night? The Thursday night clapping and pan rattling. That was a real eye opener for me. I can't believe how quickly that got taken up. And we did a bit of research on her. I can't remember her name now. I think she was a Dutch girl who came up with that campaign. And I found her LinkedIn profile and looked at her career, and her career was full of sort of internet marketing, campaigning, this sort of like media PR sort of what would you say, sort of
deception.
Well, our portfolio career, I was going to say.
Yeah.
And she happens to be the person who started this Thursday night, go to the end of your driveway and start clapping for the NHS. I thought, cracky, but people don't realise, you see. I only found it by accident. Or maybe because I was curious to see where this thing came from. Where was it instigated? Yeah. Most people just went to the end of the driveway like seals and clapped. And I tell you what was interesting was the social pressure angle of that. Yeah. So I remember looking out the window and people would go to the end of the drive and doing all that, and they would look down the road to see, oh, who's come out? Has he come out over at 32? No, he hasn't. Why hasn't he come out? Oh, she's not come out at number 19. Is she not well? Is she not well, Jane? Why is she not clapping at the end of her road? And so there was like a social pressure. People were afraid to be singled out and isolated as not being part of the flock, part of the group. So it's a weird sort of psychological angle that was constantly played on us through various points. They were constantly playing psychological games like the nudge unit. Yeah. Was all over it. It was really interesting to watch as an observer. Terrifying.
Yeah, well, that's right, Phil. That's the word. It was terrifying. It was terrifying. Because you know, like you, I've done my reading about. I'm reading a book at the moment about. It's about this village called Oberstdorf in Austria, and it's basically describes what was happening in Oberstdorf in the 1930s and how people reacted to certain kind of historical events and what happened in the village at, you know, year by year as Hitler kind of seized power and how people reacted.
Fascinating. I'd like to read that. Send it.
I'll email it. I'll email it, and I'll actually put it in the video description as well, because I'm sure there'll be other people watching who want to watch it. But the other thing as well, Phil, I don't know. Thanks very much for coming on and giving me your time. But
My
I'd love
pleasure.
to. I'd love to talk to you about uh, spirituality, religion, because we've only got 6 minutes left before my kind of free. But oh no, less than that. 4 minutes 47 left. So there's no way we can kind of start that subject. But would you be up for that?
Absolutely, yeah. It's one of my favourite subjects, theology.
Yeah, brilliant,
I'm
brilliant.
always looking
Is
to
that what you?
explore.
Is that what did you? You've just self-studied that, or
Yeah, yeah. I would say probably from my sort of mid-20s, mid to late 20s, I started getting into reading. I
yeah,
hated school. I didn't really go to school as much as I could. There was an intervention, I think, in third or fourth year, because back in those days you could just not go.
yeah?
And it's different now. They're monitored, like it's like the Stasi monitoring them online. So
But aren't I right in thinking he did the 11 plus and that and went to a grammar school, or is that the
no,
others?
no, I'm too young, I think, to do the
All right.
11.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that no, no, I got through.
I hated school. I really hated it. I hated being told what to do, and also what I found as well was that I had questions, and when you ask teachers questions, they hated it.
Oh, see,
And
you were an awkward pupil who asked
yeah,
questions.
yeah, I was part of the awkward squad. Yeah, and then also as a teacher, I saw it on the other side. In staff meetings, there'll
Really?
be some teachers there'll be bad mouthing the students because they ask questions. And they
Wow.
just were straight line thinkers. All these people, they were all repeater stations. I don't know. Certainly, I think all of them complied. With certainly by the time I left in 2020, the medical experiment hadn't started, but they were all like following the green arrows stuck on the floor and wearing the slave muzzle with pride and doing the live action role play. Let's play doctors and nurses
Yeah.
and bad mouthing Nigel, as the tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist who thinks that who's going on about the World Economic Forum and the Great Reset, and this is a totalitarian takeover. In fact, there was only one other person, a guy called Jonathan, who was the head of English, who left the school the year pre. He left in summer 2019, but he was the only one out of a staff of like over 100.
Wow. You wonder how much people are going along with it and how much people maybe agree with you, but they're too cowardly to come out and say it.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
That's
there was one girl who I used to rate. Again, there was loads of people I used to rate, but she actually told me that one of her siblings actually worked for the World Economic Forum in Davos. She was like some sort of her dad had been the mayor of Morecambe or something, and so she was kind of like connected. I won't be surprised if she was part of the funny handshake gang and stuff.
yeah. It
But
got me thinking before when I was talking about Steve the plumber and how we try and size each other out. Maybe we need to take a lesson from the Freemasons and come up with our own code word so that we can
mm,
recognize each other in the wild. So we can
it's,
spot
it is
three.
surprising. It is surprising though, Phil, because I do think that there's more of us. I think there's about 30% of us.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I do bump into quite a few people here in Finland who are kind of wide awake, and Finns are big piss takers. They're a bit like how it was up north in the 1980s. They've got no kind of censor button at all. They'll just say all sorts of things that are not would just get you fired. They're not politically correct at all. They just tell it how it is, and they're big piss takers. So yeah, I normally talk to them about the old medical experiment, and it'd be like, well, I didn't take that shit. They'll just say it straight. They're like super straight talkers.
Well, that
But
sounds fun. Maybe I'll move over there.
you should. I tell you what, Phil, you should take a flight to Finland in the summertime and honestly, you'd have a great time. You'd have a great time. Full on party in the summertime. But it's going to cut off, buddy, in a second. So
No.
thanks very much for coming on. Really appreciate it. Really, really appreciate it.